Hello and welcome to another Polestar Pilates Hour. It is a wonderful day for many reasons. One of the main reasons is I get to have my dear friend Juan Nieto with me from Spain. Juan is our licensee in Spain. He is a physiotherapist. He is a thought leader in the movement science world. And I could go on and on. He also is one of our senior curriculum committee members internationally, helping us with developing a better curriculum in Polestar. And he also was the founder of Runity with me and many, many other things. He has his own podcast that he runs, and it's basically Movement Unchained in English, and Movimiento Descadenado. Did I say it right, one? Descadenado?
You got
it's
it.
It's a new word for me. Anyway, the other great news today is that my oldest daughter, Nicole, who is sort of running Polestar operations, she and her husband, Charlie, just had a new baby boy today. So we're celebrating a new grandchild, a new grandson.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you. Hey, I appreciate it. I also want to do a little shout out. I'm actually in New York, so the background looks a little different. I'm at the Nice and Tall studio. One of our educator and faculty members, Constantine, is the owner and director. And this particular building is the same building that Joseph Pilates had his studio in the early 1920s and 30s. So pretty cool that we're here, and we're also going to be doing a course one tomorrow and Saturday, the one that you helped me with in Germany. So critical reasoning will be run here as the last time for this year. So super cool things. We're here with a good team and having a good time. And when I come to New York, I get a chance to teach at the universities. So we got to teach at NYU and then also Hunter College Physical Therapy program. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, well today we have some really fun dialogue, and our goal is that we create more questions than answers. Right, Juan?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Let's get people confused as much as possible.
Let's build as much doubt as possible in the science.
That's the goal.
Look, when Juan, you and I have been together for over 2 decades now, since you were a young wee lad, and you have always been a thought leader. You've always been looking to disrupt a little bit the norm by asking good questions, and this is something that we want to embody. This is something that we want all of our practitioners around the world, is to challenge the norm and to ask these questions. So Juan, tell a little bit about what you're working on these days, things that you're excited about. How's your studio doing in Spain, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think it's a quite interesting time for me. I finally got the chance to have some freedom and to create, to read, to think, to research with time, not just in between 1,000 things that I was doing at the same time. So I'm really happy in that matter. So, and everything permeates from that. Like the studio is going well, the school is going really well, the podcast is growing, and I think it comes from a way of be more present, more calm, have time to think, have time to rest. And that was something I had to learn because I thought that everything was about doing as much as possible. And even I found myself asking for more work, like trying to generate more work, like more emails, more meetings, more projects. So after the pandemic, I realized that it was time to change a little bit. It took a while, but I'm kind of a different person, I would say, completely in a way. And I'm enjoying this kind of more peaceful, thoughtful moment in my life.
I am so glad for that, because I'm afraid I'm one of those people in your life that set a bad example of saying yes to too many things and looking for too much work. So I am super happy, and you're going to live so much longer and be so much healthier and have great memories by doing that. Hey, Juan, I'd love to hear a little bit about sort of the theme. And, you know, a lot of people that are on this they can listen to the podcast, but they don't speak Spanish. And I would love for you to share a little bit about what is the sort of purpose? What's the mission? The people that you're bringing on are amazing people in the movement and therapy world. What are you wanting to create with the podcast, and what's the message that you're trying to share?
Yeah, I think it was something that I think is the first project in my life that started just because, just out of love. Like I felt like I wanted to share conversation with very interesting people and having the platform to do it publicly, and also to expose myself the way I am. Because when you speak for hours and hours and hours like you do in the Pilates hour, people get to know you and you cannot be false. What you see is what it is.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have, because for me it's difficult to show what I do or what I think in social media. I'm very lousy on that. I'm not I'm not very good. So I need 3 hours podcast to explain myself. So yeah, and the project is getting even much better than I thought, because I am started to reach very interesting guests, all in Spanish for now. Maybe I could do it in English, but I feel more comfortable in Spanish. And we have had like Pilates teachers, movement teachers in the movement culture, neurologists, physical therapists, philosophers. So we are trying to understand what is movement, how it affects our life, what happens when we are not in a good relationship with ourselves, with our movement. Lately, is starting to get more into spirituality, awareness, consciousness. What is that? What it means? And all the entanglements that happens between our physical body, our mind, our consciousness, our spiritual being. So it's been very, very interesting, challenging sometimes, but I think people are getting to think about going into the podcast and go down into the rabbit hole of these complicated ideas and questions without answers. I think that's what's going on.
And I mean, you're just the name of the podcast, being unchained, or being freed and liberated from some of the underlying, things that we've been indoctrinated with from physiotherapy school, from biomechanics, from fitness and conditioning and sports training. We were given so many rules, like you have to, we move in this plane, or the joint does this, or the tissue shouldn't be loaded in this way. And you've really been exploring things like your jiu-jitsu and rugby. You've gone through your own personal injuries, as have I, and sort of going through that process of discovering your own body. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you have been mapping your own pathway. And more importantly, how have you sort of deviated? And again, I want to say this correctly. I don't want to offend anybody, but there's the rules that we have for what we call a novice. So somebody that's just starting a program, maybe they have some rules to follow, or they have some contraindications. But as we mature in movement, all of the complexities that you talked about, the psycho, bio, immuno, the list goes on and on of factors that influence movement, and it becomes incredibly complex. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey of discovery and some of the things that maybe we were indoctrinated with it, and now we're looking at it and going like, that doesn't apply in this situation, or it doesn't always apply. There's something else going on.
Yeah. Well, that's how much time do we have?
You got to put your 3 hours into 1 hour.
Okay.
In English.
No, I will try. It's a very, very good question. We all got, probably everybody who is listening or watching this webinar is kind of attracted to some sort of control. Like the method is called contrology. So there is something in ourselves that we need to recognize that we like about control. So that is something that I probably had. I am so grateful that I started my movement journey through Pilates, and especially through you and through Shelley and all the people that really bring the Pilates essence, the philosophy, which is very important from the very beginning, from the very beginning, from the first time I heard you, you were talking about the Pilates philosophy and paying respect to that. But at the same time, you are always talking about this critical reasoning or critical thinking. Like, if we are evidence-based practitioners, our objective or our duty is to make ourselves sure that we are false. Like, we need to look for proof that we are wrong. That's the scientific critical mindset. So I learned that from you very early. So even though we were playing in a kind of a construct, in a box that help us to understand certain things, like you said, sometimes it's a shortcut to understand how to deal with people with pain. And at the beginning, we don't understand why neutral position was a good idea, or using this kind of breath or not. But it worked. And as soon as we are getting more experience, as soon as we are getting more scientific information, we started to find the nuances. And it's not about the neutral, it's about how the movement is moving from one place to another, or some other tissues are getting loaded, or just the person is having a different experience, is connected with their own interoception, proprioception, and that is creating a positive experience. So there are so many things, like you say, that is very complex. And then as soon as you get into that, you realize that there is no truth. There is not real truth that is completely specific to the person you have in front. And that person has a complete universe inside of her or him. So you need to consider all of that. So that's why this excessively mechanistic, reductionistic way of addressing movement, physical therapy, Pilates, I cannot comply into that. I think we are more fun and interesting than just a set of mechanics. And again, biomechanics helps, and we can have this conversation about certain knowledge and understanding biomechanics helps you to break the rules of biomechanics and say, okay, this is a factor, this is a variable, but this is not everything. It's like you said, is if you are lifting and your spine is flexing and you're doing okay, and you are creating a progressive overload, and little by little you get adapted to lifting weights in flexion, hopefully your tissues will get ready to manage that load. Maybe it's not painful, but for other person that could be very painful, and they need to understand how to lift weights in neutral position. And by that, I'm not saying flexion is wrong, neutral is good, extension is bad. It just depends on what is going on, what's happening with the person. And that is way more fun. And then you go into a kind of chaotic, uncertain situation. Then you realize that you don't know nothing, you know very little. And the more you know.
What's the old saying, right? The more you know, the less you know.
The less you realize that you know. So that kind of humility, for me, give me a lot of kind of calm in the way I manage my expectations and my patients or my clients' expectation. So okay, let's play. Let's see what happens in this interaction between the two of us: the movement, the floor, the equipment, the rings, the weights, the tree. So this is a little bit of what I'm doing now, is trying to create some agency in my patients through letting them to play, letting them to explore. Even though sometimes it's bad, even though we have a negative effect because they get pain one day after one session, we realize that's okay. It's just we are adjusting, we are playing. But this, for me, this is key. Allowing them to play even though they are wrong, and to get agency and understand the strategies that work for them, is what gives me more, like, better results. And it's about them.
Yeah. Let's play with that a little bit. And again, you held this wonderful conference, you and Blas, a number of years ago before COVID, that was particularly focused on play. And you asked me to do a little research and do a presentation on play. And then we had just this experience that was just continuous. Kim Gibelisco, there were a number of us that were there. And we just had this wonderful explorative, fun experience of movement that didn't stop even into the night, dancing and partying. And a couple of things that come to my mind as you were talking. It's like if we look at, it's called Bloom's taxonomy of learning, and Bloom's taxonomy of learning looks at, how do we work with somebody that's a novice or a beginner, and then how do we progress them, and how do we eventually give them that, what you're talking about is this internal locus of control, that they know their body so well, they can listen to it, that they know how much they need to do for tissue adaptation and how much is too much that actually hurts tissues, or how far they can push themselves because they've now had that experience. And injury is part of life. I mean, it is, you and I have both gone too far in things and then learned from it. And then we come back and we adjust, and we adapt, and we do those kind of things. So one of the things that I find very interesting right now is, because we often get stuck in Bloom's taxonomy and we think that the novice has to go through these rigid process. Now, granted, there are sciences that you need to know about the body, even if they're evolving. So it's like, you have to know some anatomy, you have to know biomechanics, you have to understand some myofascial and maybe some motor control theories. But what I'm looking at, and this is something that I know you're working on with us and developing, how do we start the novice through more experiential learning? And I preface that with the idea that, we have learned, it's a book we've shared with you before, and Shelley and I have read a number of times, Make It Stick. And it's really a book on learning. It's not a book on teaching. And if we learn how people learn, then our teaching becomes almost extinct. It's just a matter of create structure that people can experience learning, and then have the ability to try to articulate it. And, they try, and it's not going to come out eloquent like you and I have practiced for years. But it's going to, if they are tried to, and it's hard and they struggle, they're creating these neurological baskets that now when they go back and they have the experience again, it starts filling the basket, and they start having words and feelings and expressions that do that. And I'm very interested in this. Like, to me, it's a new form of learning movement, but actually it's very ancient. I mean, if we go back into martial arts, if we go back into early yoga, if we go back into early tribal movement expressions, or to Africa and looking at tribal rituals and things that happen, this was the way of learning. And it's like, how do you see it? I know you're super interested in this, but how do you see, because I know there's no right or wrong in this, and we've always talked about that. It's like, how do we create a better environment for early adaptation of internal reflection, internal locus of control, internal feedback, that even though they can't express it, they are experiencing it. They are discovering self, even in the most basic level of knowing how they can push themselves, they can create, they can explore. They're not scared of bending forward or, reaching for things, playing sports, etc.
So we don't even need to go that far. We just need to look at our kids, our babies. And this is the best example of how humans learn to move.
Agreed.
And I always say the same is, thank God there is no movement coach, because they don't understand language when they are starting to play, because nobody tells them to activate their transversor or the big toe or the
lift your pelvic floor.
Engage your pelvic floor, release your shoulders, and all the stuff. So the walking is probably the biggest achievement that we are able to do as humans. Like, it's very difficult, and we do it very naturally. And the way we learn is trial and error. It's like, we see the people around. Okay, they are standing, they look like they can do a lot of things. I want to participate. I want to be part of the group. Every time I do a little achievement into that process, people get amazed and they cheer, and I'm encouraged. So I'm getting this social credit. So I'm very motivated to walk because of my tribe, because of my community. And then it's very difficult. I don't know how to do it, but I have no other option. I want to do it. I'm a human. And I start playing with it. Nobody can tell me, do this, do that. This is wrong. This is right. I just need to fall 30,000 times. And every time I fall, my nervous system is creating a new iteration of, okay, this was too fast, this was too slow, you need more strength, you need more balance, everything is wiring in a very complex, rich way until you are able to stand up when you are ready. There is no time. It's just when your nervous system, your sensorial motor system is ready. And then you can do it. And you integrate, and you can use it, and you can do a lot of things from that. And that's the way we learn.
Yeah, I was going to just to comment on that because it's beautifully articulated. And I think that, as we look, humans naturally seek efficiency based on the task we perform. Nobody has to tell you how to be a more efficient mover. I think this is a very basic concept. And we do see it in the children, right? So by the time they're 3 years old, they're running and their movement is quite efficient considering where they were 2 years earlier of, scooting or crawling. The other thing that I find interesting, and you talked about it, and I think this is a really important message, is the motivation to move, to explore, to have that experience. And I think of how many parents have been too much of a helicopter parent, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they have taken all of the falls away from their children. They have taken all of the tree climbing away from them. They have taken all of the danger out of their life. Or the risk of danger, and then I see them as, older children or teenagers, and their level of function and interaction and participation is really impaired. And you look at trying to learn something new that you should have learned when you were 3 or 4, when you're 16, 17 years old, is frightful. It's too scary. And the risk of some of those things happen there. So that's another area that you just brought up that I think, like, how do we, with our clients, create that environment that lets them, it's like, Shelley talks a lot about this as well, is let them make mistakes. Let them, do too much resistance, do too little resistance. And that's my point of how do we get them to focus back into that internal feedback? How do we get them to own their own bodies and to be able to know that their body is different than my body, is different than your body, and how it's going to respond for millions of reasons. It's like the numbers of factors that influence movement are exponential in the millions. It's when you look at the mathematics of it. Remember the cone that I built?
Yeah.
Well, we use the cone because the cone represents infinite rays. And even though we picked out 10 rays of things that impact movement, the reality is there's millions. You look at Feldenkrais, you look at other neuromotor sciences and chaos theory, there's just, everybody is so diverse and so different. And I think that's where the critical reasoning, if anything, is just teaching us to listen and observe and see if we can repeat back what their bodies are telling us for them to be able to learn and internalize it. So let's talk about something else here for a second on this spin. I would love, you're a huge advocate of play and experiential movement. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about how you have incorporated play in your Pilates studio, your rehab studio. There's now a lot of other things. You're doing some great things with the movement class and weights and body weight and exploring movement. So in like a little bit of an Ido Portal or the jiu-jitsu kind of thing that you're having your clients explore. How is that going for you? Like, share with everybody.
You open so many branches of discussion, so interesting that I would talk for hours. So first, a couple messages.
We'll reschedule. We'll do another hour. That's fine. Okay, and I'm going to do it in Spanish with you. So let's just do what we can do in the next half an hour.
Yeah. So about motivation, I think that is a very important topic. Sometimes, it is kind of very philosophical from the beginning if we are going to have a successful experience with a person or not. If the person comes to us because the doctor told them that they have to do Pilates because it's the best for the back, for me, that's not a healthy relationship with what we are going to do. It's not the proper mindset. The philosophy behind it, for me, is already broken. Why? Because they are obeying they are obeying what the doctor said. It's not something that they decided to do. And maybe they hate Pilates. Maybe they don't like it, but they complain and they go and do it and do it and do it. And I think this is not a movement practice. I think this is, again, another kind of external task that we need to obey to be a good person and to be healthy and for whatever. So in terms of motivation, I think it's very important to people understand that as soon as they move, everything works better. That's it. I would say 99% of the people, the mood improves, the metabolic system improves, sleep, look, all our system reacts in a very positive way, even cognitively, in terms of learning and attention and focus and all that stuff. So moving is something that is going to bring us joy, or should bring us joy, and you should participate in something that is interesting for you, that you love, that you like. So for me, Pilates was very interesting for many, many years, and I loved it. But there was a time that I stopped finding it as interesting as before, and then I needed to expand the boundaries to feel this kind of drive into I need to learn more. But every time I hurt, I come back to Pilates and I use it and I love it, and I make peace with Pilates and say, oh, this was so amazing and it feels so great. And I'm so thankful that it's there. So I use it as a tool, okay? So that in terms of motivation, I think we should encourage the people to say, okay, you're here, you want to, whatever the goal you want to achieve and why you are here, but what do you really like? What do you enjoy doing? Maybe you like swimming, maybe you're like, okay, so I'm gonna help you to go biking as soon as possible and then forget about me. Because what you really like to do is to do cycling, okay? So for me, that's very important. And other things that I think is not what is the optimal way of doing it, is maybe we should stop doing things that doesn't help. For instance, telling all the time what they need to do, like provide too many instructions, like do this and then do that. And then again, it's another way of obedience. They are passively obedient about what a supposed expert is telling them to do. And again, that is not a very healthy relationship to get very good results. Maybe you get more stability, more control. They will definitely do Pilates better, but they are not growing. They are not doing things that they really need to explore. So the less we say, the more they are the protagonist of the situation. And the way I drive their attention is through constraints. I use the context, I use the environment, I use the Pilates equipment to create the movement that I want to share with them in a way that is so clear for them that is very strange that they do something different. So my cues are just a constraint of attention. It's like, okay, I want to focus your attention in the sacrum or in the feet, whatever. Or I set and I use the wall in order to create a limitation for the arm and to provoke more thoracic extension. But at the same time, I'm driving their attention to how does it feel into your shoulder, into your thoracic spine. So I think the proper way is maieutic, is what Socrates did, and is this idea of I'm not having the answers. I'm giving you and sending you questions. How do you feel about this? Yeah. What did you learn? What happens in your feet? What happens with your breath? So you are just manipulating their attention in a very subtle, respectful way, so they have the opportunity to get involved with their own body again, because they probably have no proprioception or interoception on that. And it's like you said, always, it's as little as possible, just as little as possible, as little intervention as possible. Sometimes I'm just quiet for 2 minutes because I know they are in the process, they are focused. And if they are distracted, maybe I intervene.
Yeah, you bring up again, I mean, just this is really good for the audience that's listening to this one, is because we've been so indoctrinated with this is the right cue, this is the right teaching technique. We empower our students to be able to have a library of images, and yet if we don't facilitate the whole concept of the internal reflection, and what you realize is as you mature as a teacher, you start or a facilitator, better than a teacher, a facilitator, you start realizing that, you might make this little tiny tweak of the position of the pelvis and then ask him to do that exercise. And again, create that internal reflection, that internal perspective. And what we find is, how do we shift this idea that we are teaching and we are the external locus of control and we're going to make you better? Because a lot of them, like you said, they come with that prescription to come to us, or with that ideation that I'm going because I'm told you will make me better. I'm told you will manipulate my back and I will be better. I'm told,
and that's a lie. We don't do that. Maybe by lack and for a combination of factors that we don't even understand, we have an interaction with a person and pain goes away. But we cannot even repeat that. I know we cannot. We are not healers.
It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating because when you do learn that and you see that, to me, well, here's the thing. And you went into a word that you said earlier on, and that I love talking about mindfulness. I love talking about emotions. I love talking about spirituality. And spirituality for me is not religiosity. I always like to make that very clear. Spirituality is about being aligned, right? It's like being centered. It's about knowing who we are. And the way we know who we are is by connecting and listening and internal reflection and knowing what our limits are, challenging those limits, and really having an idea of who we are. And you see this over and over again in tribal cultures, right? You see this where the teenager goes out maybe with a little bit of psilocybin mushroom or something, but they go out and they have these experiences in the wilderness and they have to go through these difficulties. And, we talked about this a long time about Hunism in the Polynesian Islands. It's like, hey, when you can align your subconscious with your conscious, then you're tapping into a much higher source of knowledge, right? Whether it's the Akashic field or it's the Holy Ghost or it's the universe, I don't care what you call it, but people tapping into that. And I'm very, very interested, and I'm ready to be even more vocal about it than I was in the past, of like, we have a responsibility to help people find that internal locus of control so that they can govern themselves. And we have to quit thinking that we are the one with all the answers to govern them. That's an external locus of control, and it's very unhealthy.
100%.
For everybody.
And that's
for everybody. It's a false teaching.
Absolutely. Even though you are an amazing physical therapist, you have treated thousands of patients, you have a huge knowledge and intuition. And there are patients that you cannot help, me as well. And there's a lot of factors and things that has to happen in order for us to be able to facilitate the process that person needs to help himself or themselves. It's not that we heal, it's that we are a mirror that they get some information that allows them to change. And in order to truly change, like you said, it's not just the mind, it's not just the psychology, it has to be deeper. I don't know how to call it, but let's call it spirit, higher self, higher whatever. But there is something there that is, you said beautiful. It's like it really aligns who we really are, not this monkey mind that is talking, I am Juan, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a business owner, I'm a rugby player. No, this is just narrative that are, this is part of external, but me, Juan, as an animal, is somewhere behind, and you need to align into that kind of higher source or self or different part of yourself that is not rational. It's not always about rational mind. It's something that you need to feel. It's very difficult to explain, and for me, it's very novice.
I always ask people, like, have you ever felt like you're walking and all of a sudden you get a premonition, like stop, and then a car comes passing by, or you get a premonition to call your kid or your spouse or somebody in your family, and you make that call and they're like, Wow, how did you know? I was just thinking about you, or I needed you so badly. So these type, and you talk about Carol Davis with her twin sister, different parts of the world, and having a premonition at the exact same time that they have to be together or they have to talk. And so there are energies that we're clueless about. We really are. We don't understand them. But I do want to go back to this idea, and this is where talking about play, the definition of play was that we take on roles and we follow rules that we agree upon, and that play could be things like politics, religion, work, academia. Those are all play. Those do not define who we are. And this is very important, that when we get to, and this is what I'm hoping to do on this next round of tours that I do, is really talking about this concept of how do we facilitate people to find their own alignment. And we start off with movement, because movement is our skill. Movement's our skill, and it's our tool. And we're going to do that because we believe that when we facilitate body awareness, that we also create mind awareness. And when body and mind are connected, we create spiritual awareness. 100%. And so we become the facilitators of that first step. And that's why if we have language that blocks the idea of internal reflection and internal control, or we have our own belief mechanisms that think you need me, right? Or our ego is so high because our self-esteem is so low that we feel like, I need them to need me. I need them to know that they can't survive without me, kind of thing. Versus, and this is very deep inside of our own doctrine and philosophy of Polestar, of Pilates, Joseph, right? Joseph's second guiding principle was whole body discipline. And it was talking about having that contrology, that internal awareness to govern yourself, to increase your self-awareness, to increase your self-confidence through your movement, your body alignment, that your body can allow your mind to be fully capable of participating in your many activities. He doesn't say your body participate. Your body has to be healthy enough for your mind to be able to participate in all of its capacities. And so I love that, you and I have always had these beautiful dialogues and challenging things about spirituality, challenging things about indoctrination, academia. We've both been through a lot of it. You and I both love looking at research, looking at what's out there. What are people making claims on? I want to ask a couple questions. We have a couple questions that have come in the Q&A one over this discussion. The first one comes from Carolyn, and she says, within the lens or current understanding of safe movement for decreased bone density, how does one approach cautioning or stopping a client from moving in a way that feels good and intuitive to them, but at the same time endangers or harms their body? I know that you have some very strong feelings about this. So maybe take the first shot at it. I think the key here is saying it's something that feels good and intuitive to them, but we have this medical diagnosis that's saying that you have a bone density issue and we shouldn't be doing that. How do we proceed with that? What would, again, we're not taking liability for anybody that goes out and does anything from this webinar, but in your personal practice, and I know what I do in my personal practice, but I would love to hear how you would answer that.
I think if we, when bone is getting lost, it's one of the highest morbidities, like the highest chances of dying, because bone requires so much energy and metabolism process that when you start losing it, your whole system is kind of in decay. So that is very important. That doesn't happen. Like when you are in that situation.
Yeah. Every system needs that calcium. Yeah. Every system in the body.
Yeah. So we need to understand it's not just about the physical, it's about the whole health and lifespan and health span of that person. That's the first. So it's not just about their bodies. And sometimes this is important. And sometimes with patients with pain, I need to remind them, I don't care if your knee is painful, we're going to keep doing this because now I'm worried in something way more important than your knees. Maybe your knee now, because it hurts, because everything looks fine, is yet most important for you. But in 5 years, you're not going to give a shit about your knee because your heart your brain, your
Nervous
functionality is
system.
completely
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
So we need to make a decision. So if we're working with people with osteoporosis, lack of bone density, I think it's very kind of intuitive to say, okay, most of them are like flexed, so we are not going to need a lot of flexion. We live our life into flexion. We know that probably the spongy bone in the body is going to be the softer, and we know for kind of decades of research that there is more likely to have fractures. And we know that we need to load that person, that we need to work on extension, because the cortical bone in the back of the spine is really, really hard. It's like the one in the head. And we need to load them. We need to find a way for them to carry weights, external weights, to jump, to dance, to extend their spine as much as possible, to enrich the movement as much as possible. Something can happen. You can have an adverse effect by your movement practice. Yeah, maybe, but they can also an adverse effect in like going to groceries.
Go to the bathroom.
Like, yes. So what I mean is like, you need to work really, really hard with this person. Like, load them. They really need load. Their system is asking desperately for load. And there is a ton of science, decades of science, that we know that the bone responds to load. So the more we load actually into extension, into the thicker part of the bone, the better results we are going to get. And also the muscle. We know that the muscle is a paracrine, I don't know if that's the word in English, organ that really creates hormones, and is really important for our health. So maintain our muscle is something very important for our all health span. It's not just because of how it looks or with what we can do. It's for us as a person. So I think that is something that you need to make a decision to be very safe and do very little load and actually not helping a lot, or take a little risk and try to get more load into that system, to really get your commitment with them in order to help them to, okay, this is the way to do it if we have a way to do it.
Yeah. And you know what I love about that too is, we've been talking about internal awareness.
Yeah.
And the reality is you have to create a fair amount of compression to be able to cause a fracture of that type of bone. Yeah. So it's like when people are aware of their bodies, they're still going to tie their shoes, they're still going to go to the bathroom, they still got to put their pants on and their shoes on. They're still going to pick their bags up off the floor, they drop something down. So, I mean, from a functional humanistic standpoint, they're going to move in those positions. But as you said, it's like, how do we counteract some of that with just making sure that we're instigating good load in good vertical posture, human kind of right posture, that they have that, and then teach them awareness so that they're not, that they know what compression feels like, and know that what they should avoid. If they have to hold their breath, for example, to do that breath is probably telling you you're in a range of motion that you probably shouldn't be in today, because it might be different tomorrow. And I think that's also really important. There's times where, if my back feels really stiff, you're going to move from 1 or 2 segments. If you feel loose after a class, you might move from 6 segments, and now there's no load on that anterior vertebral body. So I really like that. A couple more questions that came up. Andreina, our dear chief of operations, has a question here, and this is a loaded question. But she says, what type of training would be perfect complement for us as Pilates teachers to understand the whole individual and how to best facilitate a positive movement experience? You took that right out of Critical Reasoning and the Principles book. But just addressing movement, like, how do we, you've had to learn it, I've had to learn it. How do we learn the language, and even like what we've learned from Carol Davis and Helen Mason and just a ton of people that we've looked at, from things like NLP, communication, connection, reflection. What are some things that you're using now, Juan, to be able to, do you have anything that you're reading or things that you're looking at that have really helped you get out of the zone of being, I am the teacher and you do what I say, versus, how do we communicate with them to shift their mindset of fix me to guide me to fix myself. The
Yeah.
healing is inside of me, not outside of me.
Yeah. First, I would say to the first question of Andreina is practice what brings you joy. Like, first of all is do something that you really like, that you really enjoy, whatever it is. And then maybe you need to face the reality that you are not ready to do that. Maybe you're not ready to surf, you're not ready to rock climb, you're not ready to do jujitsu. But if there is something that you love to do, go for it. I can help you. We can go with you and give you some ideas, and we maybe have some experience into that, and we facilitate the pieces that are missing in order to get there. Again, as little intervention as possible from ourselves. So that is something that I learned from jiu-jitsu. When you go to a jiu-jitsu mat, and in 5 minutes there's a guy who's trying to choke you, like, period. Like, okay, what do I do? And so then you go into survival mode. Like, then you have a lot of stress, you make a lot of mistakes, you are really anxious, it's very uncomfortable. But then you realize that strategy through strength, nervousness, it's not gonna work. And then you need to find new strategies out of survival. You really need to, because the more time you spend not understanding what is going on, the more you're tapping out everyone every 10 seconds.
Right.
So it's a very humbling experience, and you need to be ready to understand that whatever the process that you start is going to be a delayed gratification. Like, it's not going to feel great instantly. Like, you're not going to be the best at jiu-jitsu or the best at pole vaulting first day. No, you know that if you want to do pole vaulting, I don't know,
years.
You need months and years to really go into that very complex movement pattern. It's very, very complex. But there's a delayed gratification that as soon as you are able to do it, it's like, yeah, I made it. And those little moments, those moments of insight is what drives you forward. Like, yeah, I understood this little thing in this rolling situation with my partner. I understood finally this that my teacher told me 20 times, and I have no idea what he meant. So it's through experience, it's through your own awareness and connection and attention through the movement, when you can understand what is the best strategy for you, what you can do, what you cannot do. And you said it before, and we know that very well, through injuries, is an amazing learning opportunity. The biggest learning opportunities for me has been through failures and through injuries. Like, when I really realized, like, man, something got really wrong here.
Well, in that book, Make It Stick, it actually wants failures, right, at the micro level, because failures is learning. It is the gestalt. It's the learning.
Yeah, David Deutsch, that is someone that I'm reading quite lately. He says that problems are the source of all knowledge. Like, all knowledge comes from a problem. So we should embrace problems. You have a problem. Your answer should be, good. We have this problem. It sucks. But at the same time, good. An opportunity to grow, an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to get more agency, more autonomy. So you said at the beginning that we are not allowing kids to play because of fear, and we are creating this neurotic society. Like, everything is it's a problem, and we complain all the time, and we want everything that is comfortable, that is fast, that works better, that the metro arrives at the right time, and if not, I'm gonna be yelling on the subway there in New York. So we are refusing to experience pain. We want a painkiller because I don't want to feel pain, because I am so entitled that I I don't have to feel pain, even though
I
I'm not
deserve
human.
not to
So
feel
this
pain.
kind of neuroticism that is created through fear, through lack of proprioception, through lack of understanding what is going on with ourselves, is what is kind of moving away from our own human nature. And I always, with you, it's you. I know that you have this very kind of nuanced, granular way of understanding your own body. When you explain things that happens to you, you are very aware that you're getting sick, you're getting a cold, or something you ate was wrong, or the knee is working in a way that you feel strange. And that happens to me the same. I'm very connected with my own body, and I understand what is going on very quickly. But you realize that people, they don't.
Yeah.
They are sick and they don't even realize that they are getting sick. So you said it before, through movement, we can encourage that communication, because it's knowing your movement, knowing your tissue pressure, slight touch, weight distribution, tension, strength, compression, decompression, hanging, jumping, rolling. Everything is creating this very rich information system in our own body.
Yeah.
And that permeates into our mind, and that creates to feel the world in a different way. So that allows us to grow in a spiritual way as well.
And we see that over and over and over again. We go in and we work with somebody, individual or class, and all of a sudden they're talking about things like, I'm changing things up in my house, or I want to be more time with my family, or I'm in a marriage that isn't really in alignment with who I am. And it's like, we didn't talk at all about those things, right?
Yeah.
We were just teaching movement and teaching alignment and movement. And I find this so interesting, and I have for years. And I think as practitioners, and this is where, I'm trying to lay a new level in the critical reasoning of, most importantly, the interviewing process. And
absolutely.
in the interviewing process, if we are capturing what they want to do, what do you believe you should be participating in? What do you believe it should look like for you? What do you believe is limiting you from doing that right now? And being willing to understand the magnitude, the chaos theory magnitude of factors that can totally impact the success or the failure of their desire. And then inside of that alignment, sometimes what our responsibility is their desire of what they want to do is so far away from their physical capacity that they're never going to be aligned in this lifetime. And so what happens is they fail, but they fail in a way that's unmotivating. Their dopamine quits firing, they get depressed. So sometimes rather than telling them you can't climb Mount Kilimanjaro, it's like, hey, let's start with a 5K walk. There's an event coming up in a month. Let's get you ready for a 5K walk. And then they have this little experience. And those are the kind of things that we can facilitate without busting their dreams, without taking away what their belief system is, but to help them find micro alignments. And we know you and I both love Huberman, that he talks so much about the motivation system and how these little tiny successes create almost an addiction to continuing to follow the jujitsu path or to follow the ski path or whatever that activity is. And those are really these big rewards in the end of looking back and going, man, look where I was a year ago, and look where I am today and what I've done and where so it's super important that we are communicating.
Think about this. It's like actually the dopamine system is higher in the anticipation of discovery.
Yes.
So it's not the discovery itself.
It's not the discovery. It goes away.
Like maybe I'm going to discover what I'm looking for. And that maybe is what really triggers our kind
motivation.
Of exploratory curiosity. And this is the mindset that I try to share with my students when they move. It's like, some people come to me because they want to run a marathon, and they fall in the fallacy of the arrival. Like they believe that when they finish the marathon, they are gonna be super happy And what happens is that they put all their attention and all their expectation into that moment. And when that moment arrives, it's nothing very special, and goes away. Instead of enjoying every step, every little struggle, every little problem, every little difficulty on the journey, on the way. And with movement, it's very easy for us because we are always, we're going to have a challenge. We are always looking for a new challenge. It's very easy. The possibilities to grow are countless. So the way we help them through that journey, in order for them to being in the zone, like, it's not very easy, but it's not impossible. It's like challenging enough that they are almost reaching it with their hands. They are almost about to do it.
Yeah.
They are getting better. They know that they are close. But when they are arriving, you move the goal a little bit higher. Yeah. So they are continuously in this mode of learning, improving, optimizing, refining. And that makes it very interesting, because I always say this, and this is very stupid, but some people don't realize. People stop your classes, stop doing exercise, or stop doing something because they get injured or they get bored. Those are basically the only two options. If they leave your studio, it's because they get injured or they get bored. Yeah. If they are interested, if they are connected with the practice, they think they are growing, they feel that there is something that is creating benefit into them, they will never go. So that's the two things that we need to take care of. Is like, make sure that the practice doesn't hurt them in a way that they need to stop, like literally stop. And at the same time, that is interesting enough for them, not for us. So they are growing continuously. Yeah. And those kind of axes are every time in my head, all the time in my head when I teach classes.
Yeah. Hey, Juan, unfortunately, we're out of time, which is crazy because I can't believe an hour went by already.
Yeah, man.
And I'm thinking of like some key takeaways today in this conversation. First of all, we don't have all the answers. I think that's important. Yes. We have very few answers. We have Absolutely. Ideas. We have some constructs that we use to try to understand or to process. I do think construct is important for us to have, but then to look at how do we break the black box? How do we poke holes in it? In science, we call it the null hypothesis, that there will be no change if we do this intervention. That's your strongest example. We can do that as practitioners. I'm going to try using this type of exercise series with the goal that, it's going to do this, but I'm expecting it not to work. Yeah. And it sounds sort of backwards, but when we do that and it works, then we know that it's not our bias pushing it and making it happen, and being open to all the other factors that could make it happen. The second thing was
scientific mindset, 100%.
And the second thing was just looking at this idea of the human right to play and the exploration, and for us to get out of being the driver's seat and be more of a facilitator of what they believe, of what they're looking for. We have massive number of tools. So we can easily, if they say, hey, I want to play tennis, and they believe that they can't play tennis because, they can't shift side to side with their knee anymore. We say, great, well, let's take a look at some things and try to give you some tools. And, we create that positive movement experience, which should look like shifting side to side on their feet eventually, so that they go, hey, you know what? I think I could go out and play some paddleball or some tennis now. It's like, great. That's great. And the third thing I think that we took away from this is really focusing on an internal locus of control for our clients and not making it about us, and creating that agency, that libre albedrío is what I always say, that free agency that they have to make the decisions and have the responsibility. We pass that responsibility to our clients and to ourselves for our own bodies. We have to be the example of that we exercise that agency. And it's something like, Juan knows about some of my own ailments and things that I'm working with, and just had a hip replacement. And there's times where I get it. Like, I look at my patients and I'm like, you know what? I get your frustration. I get your depression. I'm trying to work through it myself. But as I work through it, it's interesting. I talk to my friends, and I'm very blessed to be surrounded by some of the world's best practitioners in the world. And it always comes back to, what am I feeling? What am I observing? what do I really believe is going on in my body? And then how am I going to start, like I know better. And what's funny is you, Elizabeth, Alex, everybody sort of like quoting from the book, things that I've written in the book back to me for myself. It's a little embarrassing, but it's the reality is like when we're caught in the moment, sometimes it's really hard to see. And that really becomes the role of the practitioner, is to facilitate the hope and the vision, because we believe body can heal itself, tissue adapts. That's the bottom line. Neuroplasticity, tissue plasticity, that's the bottom line. All we're doing is facilitating these successful movement experiences that get them back in control, right? Funny, good book. It's a good name for a book, Back in Control. Anyway, Juan, any last thing you want to share with the audience before we wrap it up today?
No, thank you very much. Thank you for this broken English, like Andreina's that always says. I'm trying to do my best, and I would love to explain myself in a little bit more nuanced and proper English, but I'm trying. And thank you for the opportunity. And this is extremely short, Brent. 1 hour is like nothing. So people are warming up. We are warming up. So we need to make this longer.
Well, eventually, I have to follow your example and actually make a podcast that we can do that.
That would be great.
We know that's coming down the pipeline, and I'm looking forward to being on your podcast with my broken Spanish. So we'll be equal. And your broken English is much better than my broken Spanish, for sure. Yes. Anyway, listen, Juan, I can't thank you enough. You always stimulate me to think outside the box.
Yeah, likewise.
I've always done that, but sometimes we get comfortable in the patterns that we set for ourselves, and we have to push ourselves out of that box. And you are a great example of that. I don't have a right to be proud of you, but if I was your father, I would say I'm so proud of you.
No, I owe you so much. You are my mentor, one of the key figures in my life. I told you, and I can say it publicly. So I'm really, really grateful. I love you a lot. Congratulations for your grandson.
Thank you.
So happy for you, the family, Nicole and Charlie. So good times.
All right. Well, listen, Juan, we love you too. And big hugs to the kids and to Maria, and we'll talk soon. Thank you. Above all things, everybody, be kind, and we'll see you next week.